Tēnā tātou katoa. Ko hiri ki mata te maunga. Ko takiti me mā tātua ngā waka. Ko ngā pui me Ngāti Wai ngā iwi. Ko ngā te rehue te hapū. Ko Aotea te papakainga. Ko Tama Toki au. Kia ora tātou. Hi everyone, my name is Tama, and as Tip mentioned, I am the founder of a small company called Aotea. And for those of you who don't know, Aotea is the Māori name for Great Barrier Island. It's where I'm from, and it's here that we manufacture our goods and products that we sell into FMCG, as well as the health and beauty space, both domestically and internationally. I'm here today to talk about the business, obviously, and I think what I want to really cover and touch on is the community and social aspects behind what we do, and I suppose the driver that we currently are trying to express. And I think I'll do this by maybe telling a story. And in the story, I want to touch on my upbringing and how this has shaped our mandate. I want to talk about the business itself, some of the challenges and learnings. And lastly, if I have time, I want to talk to the vision of what we're trying to do. So, I grew up, as I was saying, on Great Barrier Island. And if you've never been there, it's kind of like going back 20 or 30 years, particularly in the community I grew up in, called Motaere here. There's no power, no running water, and there's still no Wi-Fi coverage, so it's quite difficult to do business sometimes. I grew up in the bush with my grandparents, and there's no pharmacy. There's, I think, one nurse in Fitzroy that we'd never go and see. And so our kuia, or our elders, would kind of brew up these, traditional healing kind of, tonics or herbal infusions. And so there's one in particular, kumaraho. And kumaraho is super bitter, but it's been used for generations to treat respiratory illnesses, bronchitis, asthma, things like this. And as all kids, when it comes to being in the bush and climbing trees and whatnot, I do remember being covered in bumps and bruises and consequently being wrapped in something called kawakawa. And kawakawa is an anti-inflammatory and takes away the swelling, and so it allows the body to heal faster and so on. And these experiences ended up manifesting themselves into the products we would bring to market maybe 15 or 20 years later. Now, there's no high school in the barrier, and although we have a primary school in the community, at the time anyway, there was like maybe 9 or 10 of us, and the teachers were our uncles, which is all well and good because you learn about tikanga and te taha Māori, which is great, but I was the only kid my age anyway that actually went to high school. And I think this is when, maybe the journey really started. So I remember being sent to Auckland Boys Grammar, and in my last year, the conversations I was having with my schoolmates at the time was what degree or what university or what trade. And you contrast that with the conversations I'd have over summer when I went back to my papakainga, which was ultimately what the gangs were like in the Bad Plenty. And this is probably underscored, so I went to law school, my mum forced me to go to law school. And on my first year, and I find out that both my childhood friends, Bronson and Regan, Bronson, my first cousin, end up in prison. And, I remember thinking, I'm at law school, these guys are in prison for the same thing. How different are we? We're related, we had some kind of upbringing to some extent, and maybe realised that on the island, when you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the opportunity. And when there's no opportunity, it leads to, a lack of purpose. And I personally believe in, I suppose, what we're trying to do anyway, that these elements or these factors are seriously contributing to why our people are, I would say, overly represented in the negative socioeconomic statistics. And this is something that we've set out to change. So I'm at law school and I think to myself, okay, there's no amount of legal policy or legal framework that's actually going to make a difference. You have to get into the fabric of the community. You've got to go back there and actually get into the weeds, so to speak. And so I think the best way to do this is to probably start a business. But, using that as a vehicle to create change, right? Create jobs and so on. And at the same time, so I incorporated a company, Ahika Proprietary Limited, in 2013. And at the same time, just for context, so when there was work going, it was always on the mussel farms. And so there were 10 mussel farms attached to the island, and everyone would work on them. And at the same time I incorporated this company, the owner of Peter Vitasevich, the owner of he had about 54 farms, but 10 of them being attached to the island, went into receivership. So I think to myself, okay, about 22 at the time, I think to myself, okay, how awesome would it be to take something that we have an affinity for, I mean, Ngāti Wai, people of the water, let's say, and something that we are very familiar with. How cool would it be to take that back to our people? And I mean, maybe I was a bit of a fairy tale kind of like dream thing going on with fantasy. But I thought about this and I requested the list of assets, and the value was, for the 10 farms attached to the island, was $10 million. So what happens, it's funny how these things happen, eh? I'm in a corporate governance class at law school in Auckland, and the guest lecturer is a man that has a hedge fund. And so I go up after the class and I tell him what I'm trying to do. And he sets up meetings. And over the course of maybe 2 or 3 days, I am successful in raising $10 million. Which, is a bit outrageous, but I don't know what to do. And so I'm real proud of myself, and I go to Koromenta, who are the receivers. I go in there and we submit the tender and tell the story and everything. And then what happens is we lose out to Sanford. And Sanford, if you don't know, Sanford's a publicly listed company. So obviously their pockets are a lot deeper, well, obviously than ours, but they, I think, had the skill set probably to run it, so it makes sense. Anyway, what I realized was I really enjoyed the process. I think 22, 23, wanted to be an entrepreneur. Anyway, I get through my law degree, and in my last year, I found a company. I'll bring them to market, the brand and the products, while I'm at law school. And kind of fast forward a few years after that, we've built a factory through the cash flow on Aotea. It houses a distillery. We've got beehives. We're hoping to acquire something called a critical extraction plant this summer. And the consequence of this is that we've actually created jobs. So in the team now, I've got about 9 people. And we're really proud, actually, to say that this is our second year offering scholarships for rangatahi Māori to go to Miles School, Auckland Boys Grammar, or its sister school, Epsom Girls Grammar. So that was something that we're really stoked to do. It's something we'll always do. I think maybe now it's the appropriate time to talk about the business itself and how we got started. And it was, way different to how we went about the mussel farm kind of venture. We started right at the bottom, at the farmers markets. And would grow the kawako and the kumaraho. My parents would set it over on a plane, would cook it up in the kitchen, and then it would sell at the Parnell farmers markets. The aesthetics seemed to be good. The story, was an appetite for functional drinks at the time. And we got into the hipster cafes and Pottsville and Grelin and so on, and then the grocers took us on, and we got a distribution contract with Karma Cola, and went nationwide. And then after that, which actually transpired maybe a year after the Karma Cola thing, we got into the supermarkets, so foodstuffs and progs. But that's when, through this whole entire journey, the cash flow is just like such an issue, and it's so expensive. The category itself in drinks, you're making like 50 cents per unit. And it's really expensive to grow, right? And we also realised that there was no real gratuity returning to the community. There were no jobs for bottling and tauranga at the time. And so we realised, okay, let's try and actually invest in the infrastructure. Let's take what we could, and we bought beehives. And this is maybe 2.5 years ago. And Manuka honey, we all know it's a pretty well-established category now, and we're kind of lucky to kind of be a part of that interest. It's always been around, but it really kind of allowed us to take a second step, particularly because it was vertically integrated. We could absorb the margins, and we sold, at one time anyway, the most expensive UMF5 in the country, because it was like these tiny little pots. But I felt as though I suppose this is the learning that really, focusing on higher margin products that we could actually make ourselves, as opposed to kind of contracting out. And then that led to taking the honey, putting it into creams, and the kawakawa that I'm not too sure how many of you know about it, but it's awesome. And putting it into a balm, like a healing balm, and manuka oil and so on. And what really galvanized the business was probably on the one side, the products themselves and being healthy in terms of margin and payment terms, but also China and Asia just generally. And we, about a year and a half ago, we got our first order with our partners in Shanghai. So about 85-90% of our business actually is in Asia. And that allowed us to reinvest all that money back into the infrastructure on the island. So we started building a shed to house and store our inputs. We started to build a kitchen to actually make the products. And one thing led to another, and we started to invest into a distillery and things like this. But what the problem was is that the tonics was like killing us. Like, we weren't making any money. And so we thought maybe scale could fix us. And with FMCG, maybe we just got it wrong, I don't know. But we just were looking at, so what eventually is we thought, okay, let's take it to Australia. And we had a deal with the Coles supermarkets between 400 and 900 doors. And then we looked at the term sheet and then how much it was going to cost to do it. And we're just like, there's no way we could do it. We're going to have to raise some capital. And so we get in touch with Lion Nathan, who I suppose shows some interest. But we realised that we would embark on a path that would ultimately lead, if we had designs to be a global drinks company with a story and so on. So once we kind of embarked on this process, it would ultimately lead to a sale, which many kind of drinks companies look to do. And then the ethical question came, okay, firstly, number one, how could are we allowed to sell something so close to tikanga and to taha Māori to maybe a company that might not share the same morals or, Lion are awesome, but it just was one of those things that we weren't too sure how it would metastasize. But probably more importantly, if a sale did eventuate, what real gratuity and benefit would actually return to the community? So we took what we learned in Asia, appetite for New Zealand Inc., love a good story, and so we thought, okay, the Kumaraho tonic sits in fridges for $4. Can we sell that for $30 or $40? With regard to what we learned about the kind of health industry and how it can be out of control in China a little bit. So we engaged in a laboratory with the intention to determine whether or not Kumaraho is actually antiviral, which would give efficacy to all the anecdotal and generational traditional stories. We're super stoked to say that we are the proprietary owners of the research that in fact does indicate that Kumaraho is significantly antiviral. And this is one thing as well we've got to be a bit aware of and understanding in terms of the tikanga sense, which I might talk to you later if I have the time, but I'm just wary. Is that? Oh, you guys can't see the time. Oh my gosh, I better speed it up. Okay, so with the Kumaraho, we're looking to bring to market, sorry to kind of catch up myself, a product next year in the kind of nutraceutical space, a herbal supplement that's antiviral. There's a lot of hurdles in the way, but the great thing about this is that it allows us to take the manufacturing of the product to Altair. Allows us to sell it for $30 or $40, and we can bring it through the channels we've established in Asia, namely China and Japan. So again, it's more in line with the mandate that we began with, and it's just awesome to see what's happening on the island at the moment. We just built or fabricated the distillery, and I think maybe this is now the appropriate time, if I have the chance, to talk about the vision. So as I say, we've got a bit of an operation there. We've got kind of 4 full-timers in town. We've got 3 to 5, depending on how part-time, full-time works on the island. And we're thinking now, okay, if we can be the market leader in the supply, particularly if you pioneer the research, to show that, and give efficacy to these stories. If we can get the research, grow it on Māori land, process it with a Māori company, could we be the purveyor supplier of, or leading, or market leader, global supplier, let's say, of New Zealand natives, or one of them? And so that's what we're setting out to do. And hopefully, if we can manage this, set up, I suppose, not a co-op structure, but empower the community to actually start growing the herbs on their land. And just for way of context, or metrics, the Manuka bush actually sells about $500 to $600 a ton, and it takes about one person one day to cultivate. So you think about having kind of jobs at the place we're trying to build at, but then you actually empower small, I suppose ultimately business owners that go out and harvest and do something they have a natural affinity for, which would be pretty cool. I'll try and wrap this up real quick. I'm just going on and on. So we're opening, when it comes to the brand side of things, we're opening a store in Commercial Bay next year. Real small, 25 square metre one. And hopefully that will serve as a flagship and give us a bit of credibility. Particularly in China, they like to see a bit of runs on the board, so to speak, with the at home, so that everyone knows the brand. And we're kind of skincare's been around for about 2 years. But and if I have a chance to talk about one last thing, I can almost see my business partners rolling their eyes on this one. So when it comes to the whole vision, what we've learned is that we love to innovate, and we love to get into industries that we might have a competitive advantage in globally. So as I said before, there's no utility on the island in terms of access to power. So we're thinking about building microgrids. We've engaged with Callahan, and we've been given a grant that will allow us to do the feasibility or R&D on whether or not there's the possibility. And so where we've settled is actually putting together, we've got a chemical engineer that will build us something called a hydrogen fuel cell, which I think people may know with the cars, and some people are suggesting that it's actually going to challenge significantly the EV kind of model space. But if you stack them up, if we can stack them up, maybe look at the research, put it behind one of our houses, and actually fix a problem, as opposed to, we've got ideas in terms of how we grow the business as well, but if we can actually fix a problem, actually give to the community power 24/7, that'd be awesome. And then hopefully, who knows, we might be able to do something with that business as well. But these are the kind of things we're looking to do, and I think to summarise, the overarching theme is the barrier, or Altair, and if we can do something in that environment or community, but we also love, I think the team, we're all ex-lawyers actually, which is quite funny, the ones that have come from grammar, and we love kind of innovation, and we love, I certainly like to talk about technology and these things, and how maybe the barrier can actually pioneer or be a testing ground for maybe renewable energy kind of concepts and technologies. Anyway, I'll leave it there, but thanks very much for having me.